Well, President Donald Trump's political opponents have fiercely hit back today on comments that he made, insisting that Democrats are responsible for declining air standards. Well, Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland is a Democratic Party representative from Washington State on the US West Coast and joins us now. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And perhaps let's begin with those families who are desperate for answers and desperately wanting to be reunited with the bodies of their loved ones. What went through your mind when you heard about this tragedy on Wednesday?
So whenever you first hear of such a tragedy, you hope there are no fatalities. And then as we learn that we didn't believe that anyone survived it, it's out of respect for the families now that we're obviously not telling anyone, naming any names until we recover the bodies. But we've recovered 41 out of 67 so far. Our hearts go out to the families because this must be incredibly difficult. And our nation is mourning right now for those who were lost in this tragic accident.
And have you been impressed with the efforts so far by the recovery teams who've been working in atrocious conditions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first responders, all the agencies immediately got to work. It's been treacherous, as you mentioned, the temperature, the water, the location on the Potomac River, but they are doing everything they can. They are working around the clock. And so they are putting forth a great effort, working very hard and doing everything we can to recover all those who perished in this horrible accident.
I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about the comments from President Trump earlier on today, suggesting that pro-diversity recruitment perhaps in some way played a part in this tragedy. What did you make of that?
Well, first of all, it is entirely not true and absurd that he would say something like that. We're in the midst of a national tragedy, and his job is to lead, to discuss how this will never happen again, and show empathy for the families. So this idea that DEI somehow caused this is not true. The standards remain high for any person who works in our aviation field, period.
And more generally, of course, he is waging a war, isn't he, against DEI and wants to reverse a lot of work that was done over the last 4 years. What do you think about that?
Well, this was part of his campaign platform, so it's not a surprise that he raises DEI whenever he can, but it is appalling and shocking and really unpresidential for him to raise this during such a tragedy. One example that I heard of recently was that he wants to not allow people in the Department of Defense to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. So the attack on DEI is constant, but to bring it up in this tragic circumstance is just unpresidential. It's lazy, and it should not happen.
And when critics say that positive discrimination is a problem in the United States, that people are perhaps being given jobs because of their background, because of the color of their skin, as opposed to their abilities, what do you say to those critics?
Well, what I say to people is that DEI never presumes that someone who gets a job is unqualified. You have to be qualified. That is the baseline. But what we know about diversity, equity, and inclusion is that it's good for organizations. You make better decisions when you have people with different backgrounds and life experiences. When you have people who represent the entire beautiful tapestry that's the United States, you're just better. You're more profitable as a business. You make better decisions. Government is more efficient. But I completely reject this idea that DEI is the cause of anything that is tragic like this, and the idea that people who are hired through DEI are somehow less qualified. You must always meet the minimum qualifications, period.
We're only a few days into the new administration, of course. Where do you think that this will go over the next few weeks, the next few months? Do you think we'll hear more rhetoric like this from the president? And what impact could that have?
So I would say that instead of responding constantly to the barrage of ridiculous rhetoric coming from this administration, we need to focus on a few things. We have a tragedy. Lives were lost. We want to recover those who perished. Families need to be notified. We want to show empathy and respect for them. And at the same time, the National Transportation Safety Board is going to conduct a thorough thorough investigation. There will be a brief report that comes out in probably 30 days, and then a longer one that may take up to a year. But let's show some respect for the people who perished. Let's conduct a thorough investigation and get to what happened. But this is going to take some time. But to throw out hateful rhetoric does nothing to unite this country, especially during this time of national mourning.
But do you think when Democrats shout back to President Trump saying what he says is simply insane, do you think that helps the debate when clearly there are many people in this country who do feel that it is an issue, DEI protocol is an issue?
Well, I would say this, that talking about DEI protocol during this particular incident is completely inappropriate. So when someone raises this issue as the cause of a tragedy, it is our responsibility to push back on it and to be vocal about it. And by the way, there are Republicans that I work with and that I know, both at home and here in D.C., who do not have a problem with DEI. And so I think that the president and people who are extremists in his party have taken this to try to weaponize it and divide people. But look, for example, at the U.S. military. It is diverse. President Truman actually desegregated the Army because he knew it made sense for us to be integrated. The Supreme Court, when they ruled against affirmative action, they made the U.S. military academies exempt from this. And so I think that when we talk about DEI, we have to look at it as an asset. We cannot be afraid to push back when people try to use it and to weaponize it. But overall, the United States of America is a very diverse country. And when more people are at the table and have opportunities, it is good for all of us.
And just very briefly, I wanted to talk to you about the airspace here. I believe that you voted recently for more flights to be allowed in and out of Reagan Airport. Do you think that was the right decision, or are you now concerned that perhaps it was a mistake?
Well, so the Federal Authorization Act, the Aviation Act that we authorize every 5 years had this added to it. So there was a vote that took place last year to add 30 flights. And I rejected that along with a lot of other people. There was a compromise made to add 5 flights. And so that's what I voted for. But those 5 flights have not even started yet at this airport.
OK. Marilyn Strickland, we really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
You're watching Sky News. Our special programme continues shortly. Coming up after the break, we'll be focusing on the crash investigation and what the NTSB is calling an all-hands-on-deck event.